about my story is it isn't my story. It's a story of grace. The part that's mine is just the plot. We all have our own life dramas. None of us matches anybody else. Every single one of us has our own life drama. The set of our dramas are different. The scripts of our dramas different. The costumes of our dramas different. Everything about each of our life dramas is different. And so aspects of the plot and the script and that stuff, yes, of course, they're my drama compared to your drama. But in terms of really what makes the story special compared to not just any other random person's drama is grace. Now, grace is there for everyone. That also isn't unique. But for me, that which makes the story so special is the way that grace came. And much like the story of Ganga when she first came out of heaven and she swept away all of the priests on the banks of the riverbed who were doing their pujas and doing their fire ceremonies and was so rambunctious that Lord Shiva had to agree to hold her in his hair and let her out slowly. In the same way for me, that river of grace came through my life and pretty much swept away anything else that was taking place at the same time. I didn't have Lord Shiva there to say, oh, don't worry, I'll hold this for you and let it out very slowly. I came here, as many of you know, now almost 23 years ago. At the age of 25, I had graduated undergraduate from Stanford in psychology. I was doing a PhD in psychology. And I didn't come, as embarrassing as it is to admit so many decades later, I didn't come looking for spiritual awakening on any kind of a conscious level. In retrospect, I would love to have one of those stories that goes, you know, I had always prayed to God to show me a deeper path, a higher path. I had prayed to God to awaken me and enlighten me. And so finally God brought me to India. I would love to have a story like that, but I don't. That maybe is somebody else's drama. My drama was, I didn't even know there was anything to pray for. Nor did I have any connection with the divine in a way that would have led me to pray. I came to India with a backpack. I came on a semester off of a PhD program to travel. In Delhi, I opened up a big, thick, Lonely Planet guidebook. There was not Google at the time. We had email. Stanford, even when I was an undergrad, had set up email by that time. And my roommate, I remember, used to go to this big room in the middle of campus and check this funny thing called email. And I remember thinking, and why bother? Like, you're going to see the same people you're sending messages to in class. Why in the world? And I remember thinking at that time, this email thing isn't going anywhere. You know, what a waste of time. Why would you leave a message on a computer when you could go and actually hand somebody a message in their hands? But anyway, so email existed. The web as we know it didn't exist. And so there wasn't a way to just go on Google and say, India, where should we go? So we had a Lonely Planet guidebook, and I opened it in Delhi, and it said Rishikesh. I was a yoga student already. I used to drive up from Palo Alto to San Francisco to study yoga. I was always an outdoors person. Nature for me was and still is the easiest way to connect with God. I wouldn't have used those words before, but I was always someone who would run to the redwoods, would run into the mountains, would run into nature at every opportunity. And so Rishikesh was a place of a river and mountains and yoga. And I mean, I didn't know that Ganga was holy. I didn't know the Himalayas were holy. I just knew river, mountains, yoga, relatively close to Delhi, an easy place to start a tour of India. And I got to Ganga. I mean, there's obviously a lot of other chapters to the drama in the middle, but I got to Ganga right here at Parmarth's Ghat. I didn't know Parmarth. I didn't know anything. It just happened to be by divine synchronicity where I ended up. And I got to the banks of Ganga, hot, tired, planning to just stick my feet in the river and freshen up. And I got to the river, and I stood there. And as I looked out over this river, I was given an experience that I had no framework in which to understand it. But thankfully it didn't matter, because it was so powerful that it just blew every intellectual capacity I had for understanding out of the water anyway. So even if I had a framework to understand it, there was no part of me left to be doing any understanding. And it was an experience that it was visual, it was physiological on every aspect of me, and it knocked me literally to the ground, and I burst into tears. Tears of not sadness, not joy, but tears of just the truth. Tears of being in the presence of the truth. And I knew in that moment, I mean, and it had been 30 seconds since I got there. I knew in that moment that this is where I was meant to be. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. You know, we talk so much about non-attachment, about vairagya and sadhana. And for me, it really was just grace. It was in that moment, nothing else mattered. It wasn't that I didn't care. It wasn't that I didn't love my family, love my loved ones, love my things, love my PhD program, love my goals. It wasn't that. It was just that it didn't really matter. The only thing that mattered was staying here. It was like everything else in my entire life, everyone I knew, everything I knew, everything I owned, every goal I ever had was here on the one hand. And staying here was here on the other hand. And it didn't even compare. And I remember vividly thinking, a few hours later, that if someone had said to me at that time that I had two choices, that I could either stay here forever, but I could never go back, and I could never touch any of the things that I owned, all I could have for the rest of my life was what was currently in my backpack, or I could have all of that, but that I would have to leave now. That I remember thinking, literally that same evening, that it wouldn't have even been a question. That I would have immediately and instantaneously and unquestionably stayed here with just what was in my backpack. That it was that that full. About a week later, I finally met Puja Swamiji. I finally had his darshan. And when I finally met him, it felt like I had had over the last week so many of these incredible experiences. Awakening experiences, you can say. Opening experiences, experiences of truth, experiences of divine connection. But none of it made sense. Now again, that didn't trouble me. I was not disturbed in any way at that moment by the fact that it didn't make sense, because I was in such a state of bliss that being disturbed was just not even part, there was no room for disturbance. But I was aware in the bliss that none of this made any sense. It just was okay that it didn't make sense, but I knew it didn't make sense. And I kept saying, oh my God, it's so beautiful, and it's so beautiful, and that was all I could say. But I knew in my mind, in some almost vestigial intellect, that if all I was meant to do was sit on the banks of Ganga and cry ecstatic tears for the rest of my life, why would I have been given what I was given? Why would I have gone through the experiences I had gone through? Why couldn't God have just sent me here as a, 17-year-old high school dropout hippie? Like, why bother going through all of what I had gone through if it was just supposed to be about me and tears of ecstasy? And I also had no idea, where was I supposed to be? I mean, I knew it was the banks of Ganga, but was I supposed to just camp out here with a sleeping bag forever? And what was I supposed to do? And those thoughts all kind of moved around in my mind for a while. Again, not causing any disturbance, but just causing an awareness that there were all of these unanswered questions. And when I finally had Puja Swamiji's darshan, it was as though his presence was the glue that held and brought all of the other pieces of the experience together, that suddenly all of it made sense. Suddenly, yeah, okay. So this is where I was supposed to be. And this is why I had the background and the experience that I had, and this was who I was supposed to learn under. And so it was an incredible experience. And again, I've stepped over and fast forwarded through a lot of it, because otherwise we'd be here till tomorrow morning with just this. But circling back to where I began about it being an experience of grace, a story of grace rather than my story, is because the only thing, almost 23 years in retrospect, that I can even begin to claim any kind of credit for. When people say, oh, you made this great decision, wow, you left those things behind. And it wasn't like that. There was no sense in me at all of having any decision to be made. The decision was made for me. The only thing that I get any credit for whatsoever is a commitment to truth and an openness to truth that I had had my entire life, that created a situation in which there was no going back, a situation in which I had to stay, because when I had seen the truth, my commitment to truth, and that was, I had grown up in a home in which you could have committed the worst thing, but if you went and you said, Mom, Dad, I did this, it was okay. But you could have done the smallest, tiniest nothing, and if you lied about it, there was hell to pay. So I was really raised with a truth is the highest. And it was something that I had really adopted in my own life. And lived by truth at all costs, truth at all costs. And so when I had this experience, as crazy as it seemed, and as completely not the package of my life that I had expected, I couldn't deny that I had seen what I had seen. I couldn't deny that I had experienced what I experienced. I couldn't deny that this was the truth, even though it was not in the package that I had thought the truth was going to come in. And so it's an experience, a story of where grace comes in when we're open to it. And that's why I said it becomes everybody's story, because the plots are different. The characters in each of our dramas are different. The scripts are different. The sets are different. But that experience of grace is available to all. And the only thing that I did was I stayed open to it. That I had a faith in grace that was enough to overpower fear of not doing what I was supposed to do. Otherwise, that's what keeps so many of us from living grace, is we think, oh my God, this isn't what I'm supposed to do. Here's what my life is supposed to look like. And we live in those boxes of somebody else's supposed to. Not our supposed to. Not our dharma. Not our drama, not our story. But somebody else's supposed to. And we live in that. And what I had was an openness to faith of the truth and the power of truth. That it overpowered any fear of not doing what I was supposed to do. And for that, I will always be grateful, because otherwise it would have been so easy to just say, oh, that was so beautiful, that was so great, and, I'll come back on my summer holidays. But I knew that I had seen truth. And every one of us is invited. Every one of us is more than invited, is encouraged to open ourselves to that truth of the universe, to open ourselves to that grace. People say, oh, I wish that I had grace in my life. But grace is there. Puja Swamiji always talks about the sun is shining. But if we're in a room and the curtains are drawn, we don't experience it. But the answer isn't sitting in the room praying for the sun, doing sun pujas and sun salutations and whatnot. But the answer is opening the curtains. And for me, it really was about staying so true to what I knew to be true. And I had no idea where it was going to take me. I had no idea I was supposed to be here forever. I just knew I was supposed to be here now. And as now, 1 minute became the next moment as the next. People would say to me from the beginning, they'd say, well, so do you think you're going to, how long do you think you're going to be here? What do you think you're going to do? And I remember saying, and I still say it, although I don't get asked that very frequently anymore, but that I used to have plans for my life. But that God was running my life so much better than I had ever run it, so much better than any of my planning had ever brought me to, that for me to take my life out of God's hands and back into mine would be foolish. Because God was doing a much better job than I had. And the other piece of it Because in the world that I come from, in the world that many of us come from, we're really taught that a successful life is about how much you can bring towards you. Whether it's possessions, whether it's people, whether it's titles, whether it's acclaim, whether it's wealth, whether it's, social standing, whatever it may be, popularity, beauty, whatever we may be looking for. But we're really taught that the goal of life is how much can I bring toward me? And the problem with that is it focuses us in the wrong direction. It focuses us to think about what can I get rather than to think about what can I give. And it focuses us to think about what do I not have rather than what do I have. And even deeper, who I am. And so even though we may not necessarily get everything we want, I may not necessarily be as rich or as popular or as titled as I, in my wildest fantasies, may envision. But what I've gotten is a fast-track certification in not enoughness. And no matter how much I get, it's never enough. Because that has become my reality. My habit, my way of being has become wanting more, wanting more, wanting more. And so not only does it drain my time and my energy and my pocketbook, but it actually roots me in a way of moving through the world, a sanskara, a neural network of not enoughness. And that ensures that no matter what I have, it's never going to be enough. And I may get to a point where I'm rich enough, but then I'm not beautiful enough, or I don't have enough friends, or I'm not popular enough, or I'm not doing enough for other people, or I'm not giving enough, or I'm not, whatever it may be. That pattern is still the same. It's still not enough. You, at the core of who you are, is not enough. And we spend our lives like that. And what being in India has taught me is that the enoughness comes not from anything outside, not from what you do, not from what you own, not from who you know, but it comes from connecting to the part of you that has never been anything other than enough, that was never divided, that was never broken, that doesn't need to be fixed, that was never injured and never needs to be healed, that's not half and looking for its other half. But it connects you with the part of you that is truly overflowing. And that's the abundance. When we talk about praying to Lakshmiji, right? We do, in India, so many people pray to Lakshmi, right? Mahalakshmi, this is Diwali. Our biggest festival is that we pray to Lakshmi. Well, if you talk to most people about what Lakshmi symbolizes, it's abundance and prosperity, but we tend to think of it as what I'm going to get. Wealth. But talk to anyone who's rich, from mildly rich to incredibly rich. It doesn't matter where on the spectrum they are, it's never enough. And if it's enough money, well, then it's not enough something else. There's never enough when I'm looking outside. And the truth is, what Lakshmiji is the symbol of, really what connection to the mother goddess energy gives us, is a connection to the experience of abundance within ourselves. Lakshmiji is not the goddess who fills your wallet or your piggy bank. She's the goddess who connects you to the fullness of yourself. That's the mother. That's the mother energy. And so that experience of abundance is an experience within the self. And this is what Indian spiritual tradition is all about. And I had the blessing of noticing it in the beginning. And I remember looking around and seeing children who had nothing, kids without shoes, who were just exuberantly happy, kids who wore the same thing every single day. And they were so happy. And I thought back to the kids I had grown up with. And we never had that. I mean, it wasn't that we were never happy. Yeah, you'd have a great birthday party. We were happy. Take us to the park. We were happy. Feed us ice cream. We were happy. But that sense of I have nothing, but I'm happy and I want nothing, is something that from the very beginning I remember saying, there is a secret here in India, and I need to stay back until I figure out what it is. And it's a secret that infuses the children. It's a secret that infuses village women. Look at these women carrying, pounds of firewood on their head, walk through the mountains. See these women in the mountains carrying pounds of firewood on their head. And you say to them, how are you? And they say, Bas, Bhagwan ki kripa. It's God's grace. And you see them sometimes, you'll see them stopped by the side. They usually go out in groups of 3 or 4, and they'll be stopped. Maybe they're tying their bundles together. And they're laughing with each other. They're smiling. You think, my God, if I had to walk 5 kilometers or more with firewood strapped to my head, I wouldn't be smiling. If I had just spent my day with a machete cutting branches off of trees to go home, and when I know that what's waiting for me is to cook the family meal, and then to clean up the family meal, and then to do whatever else I need to do, I wouldn't be smiling. But the secret of these women is the secret of this culture, which is it has nothing to do with that. They're not smiling because of their life situation. They're smiling because the source of joy has nothing to do with their life situation. And that's something that so many of us who have good life situations have forgotten. We keep thinking, oh, if I just could tweak that, if just my kids would clean up their rooms for God's sakes, if just, my husband this, or my wife that, or my mother-in-law this, or the traffic that, or my weight this, would just change how I want it to change, then everything would be perfect. And we forget that actually the inner situation, what we call the swastiti, is actually not determined by the external situation, paristiti. But that's how most of us live. Paristiti ki hisab se. Jaise paristiti hai vaise mera swastiti. Paristiti is good. Things are good outside. People are being nice to me. They're doing what I want. I'm great. It's a sunny day. We had a picnic. I'm great. But when paristiti is not according to what I want, people are not doing what I want, the world is not dancing according to my tune, my picnic got rained out, my swastiti is not so good. But I am determined to change the paristiti so that my swastiti can be okay. And that's going about it completely backwards. And so what India really taught me was, wow, if these people can be so grounded, clearly it has nothing to do with getting all the 50 items on your Christmas list. Clearly it has nothing to do with the house you live in, the cars you drive, the parties you get invited to. Clearly it has to do with something inside. And I knew, I saw that, and I thought, this is a secret I need to find. Yeah. So that's the pieces of the story, we'll say. But I wanted to bring that story to a close in order to have time to open it up to any questions that anyone may have.
I don't have a question, but let me just say that if, all those in 20, 25 minutes what you said, I picked up one point, just one point.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure, and as he said, how beautiful it is to realize and learn and hear that source of joy has nothing to do with outside. If we take that as our mantra, it may feel temporarily debilitating. Because if I've spent my entire life focused on changing my outside circumstances so that I can be happy, it temporarily may feel like the rug has been pulled out from under my feet. Because, oh my God, well then what am I doing all this for? What am I getting out of this? And if you allow yourself, because that's the moment in which most of us cut ourselves off, in which we don't have that openness to sit with the truth. And we say, forget it. Wo to sannyasi hai, chalo to aise to bolegi, right? To usko malum nahi hai wo sansar ka kya hota hai. This is the game of the mind. And that's why, actually, interestingly, filling back another piece of the story that I had fast forwarded over, which was when Pujya Swamiji actually sent me back to school, back to finish my degree. And I was furious and just absolutely inconsolably desperate. And he said to me, look, he said, if you just call home and say, I'm not coming back, he said, first of all, your parents are going to be over here any day. And as it turned out, they were already prepared to do so, which I didn't know until about 15 years later, that they actually had already contacted like the cult deprogrammers and their friend who was going to get the police to come and, fix me, because clearly something had happened. I had been, kidnapped or brainwashed or something. And he said, so if you don't go back, they're going to think you've been kidnapped, you've been brainwashed. He said, but aside from just your parents, he said, people don't want to realize the inherent value of a spiritual life. Because what it does is it holds up a mirror to their own life. If I've spent my whole life trying to make money, and you hold up in front of my face the mirror that actually the real joy of life comes from within, well, I don't want to see that mirror. Because that's a mirror that when I look in it makes me feel foolish. It makes me feel scared. I don't want to look within. I'm good at making money. I want to just keep doing what I'm doing. So I'm going to try to push that mirror away. And so he said, people don't want to realize that. And so he said, they will do whatever they can do to discredit you. They'll say you had a nervous breakdown. They'll say you ran away. They'll say you joined a cult. They'll say you were brainwashed. They'll say whatever they need to say, such that there isn't the mirror of the value of a spiritual life in their face. And he said, and that's why you need to go back. He said, that's why you need to go back. And if you are going to come here, and you're really going to leave that world for this one, you need to do it properly. And it's not just a phone call from Rishikesh that says, Mom, Dad, guess what? I'm not coming home because I'm moving to an ashram. You need to go back. And he said, you need to go back to school. And you need to show them that yes, something has happened, but something has happened that is real and true and beautiful, so that you can actually be useful. He said, because you will not be useful otherwise. He said, you will not be any kind of an effective model of a spiritual life if people can write you off so easily as someone who ran away or had a breakdown or joined a cult or was brainwashed or whatever. And so I mention this in response to that because realizing that the source of joy is within, when you've dedicated your life to the outer world, is not an easy thing. It does feel like that rug is being pulled out from under you. And so notice within yourself the immediate reaction to try to push it away. And that's why I was joking, ki our minds, this is where our minds tend to go. See what happens if, instead of pushing it away, you actually sit with that truth. It doesn't mean become a sannyasi. It doesn't mean leave that world. It doesn't even necessarily mean change anything you're doing. Our scriptures are full of householder saints and sages and rishis in the world. All it changes is how you do it. That knowledge that the source of joy is within. It's not going to mean I don't get up and go to the office tomorrow. Because there's still bread to be put on the table. There's still kids that have to go to school. There's still mortgages that have to be paid. The guy at the toll booth isn't going to take, a hug and a prayer instead of your $5. If you're going to move through the world, you still need, there still needs to be some way to do that as long as our world is going to operate on a currency of money and not a currency of love. Well, you need to have some of it to move through whatever your world requires. But it means that how I do what I do changes, that no longer am I doing that job because in that money or in that raise or in that promotion, I'm going to find my happiness. I'm not going to that party looking to feel full inside. Doesn't mean I stop going to parties entirely. Doesn't mean I stop going out with people or seeing friends entirely. But it means that I stop doing it in order to feel full inside. I stop doing it because I'm feeling lonely and bored and frustrated, and so I'm going to go to a party. Because that doesn't actually fill me on a true level. I go when I'm connected to the source of joy within me that is overflowing, and I want to share it with people I love. That's the place from which I go to a party, is, wow, I've got so much love. Aren't I lucky to find 100 people in one place with whom I can share it? Rather than, oh my God, I had a miserable day, let me go to a party and maybe I'll feel better. So it's about how we do it. So it doesn't mean I never shop. The fridge needs groceries. It's winter time, maybe I need a sweater. But I'm no longer shopping to fill my inner sense of lack. I'm no longer shopping for joy, because unfortunately that's not on any racks or shelves in any department store. Nobody is selling joy. They're selling clothes, they're selling items, but they've convinced us through very brilliant and insidious marketing techniques that through buying those things you can buy joy. And since I don't have it from within, I'm looking to buy it outside. So when I know it's within, yeah, I still go and buy bread, buy a sweater when needed, buy a pair of shoes when needed, but I'm no longer looking to buy my happiness in those things. And what that does is it creates freedom in me. And ultimately, that is actually what it's all about. Actually, all of our spiritual practice, all of what we're doing, ultimately the highest goal is freedom. When we talk about moksha, it's not just moksha after I die. It's moksha here while I live. It's not freedom from the body, it's freedom in the body. Because that which is chaining me and binding me is not the body. The body is great. It does, yeah, sure, it's got aches and pains. I'm not saying it always feels fantastic. But the body is what enables me to hold someone's hand, to give a hug, to see a sunset, to smell a flower, to drink and enjoy a nice cup of hot tea, right? I mean, really, like the body is this incredible vehicle we've been given to experience the beauty of the universe. We don't need to be free of the body, we need to be free in the body. And when I realize that the source of joy is within and not without, I become free. I'm no longer a slave to changing my outer circumstances. I no longer have to do things that don't feel right. Now I get to move only according to my inner compass, what Puja Swamiji calls our inner GPS. And every one of us has it. And that needle is pulling us toward truth. And when I allow myself to simply ask, okay, what would my life be like if I had within me the source of joy? And here's lastly a way to know that you have that, not just because I'm saying it. Think of someone or something that brings you a lot of joy. Okay? Just think about, take 30 seconds and just think about that person or that thing that brings you lots and lots of joy. Okay, so everybody feel that joy in you as you think about them. Now, that joy does not dissipate the farther you get from the person. So if you are the one, or you are one of the ones who brings me great joy in my life, and loving you brings me great joy in my life, well, when you get up and you go to the office or the grocery store, I don't have less joy in my life. I don't have less love in my life. You're not actually giving me the joy. Through you, I have activated the joy within myself. And that's what's most important. And that's how you realize, it's within me. Think of anything that brings you joy. Deep, deep, deep joy. And what you realize is, even if it's, or they are, 5 feet away, 10 feet away, a mile away, 10 miles away, you're still able to feel the joy. If the joy were due to the outside circumstance, the farther away you got from it, the less joy you'd feel. Like I always give the example of the air conditioners and the heaters, right? If you want cold air, you better stand near the AC. You want hot air, stand near the heater. The farther you get away, the less you feel. Because it's actually coming from those. We're not generating the hot air and the cold air within ourselves. But love and joy and peace, they don't dissipate the farther we get away, because they're within us. We have generated that. And we are the ones who steal it from ourselves. It's all the mind. You could be in the best place, so full of joy. You get one text message that says, oh my God, you should have heard what so-and-so was saying about you earlier tonight. It's over. End of joy. One blip on a device, my joy is over. One email. You're coming out of a parking lot. You discover that somebody's, dented your fender. Joy is over. How dare they? Who the hell was that? Why? Night is over. Somebody spills something accidentally on you. You spill something accidentally on you. Whatever it may be. We give up our joy through our own minds. Voluntarily. Nobody can reach inside you and grab it out of you. I can grab your kidneys, I can grab your liver. I mean, really, if I were a doctor, I could reach in and grab every organ in you. But I couldn't grab your joy. And yet, amazingly, if some doctor said to you, I need to remove your kidney, or I need to remove your liver, you would go out and you would get 100 second opinions. Nobody's going to give up an organ very easily. But we give up our joy and we give up our peace even before someone asks us to. It's not like they come to you and they say, Acha, give me your happiness. They just say to you, Acha, shayad kehna nahi chahiye, but this guy, what he was saying about you, oh my God, let me tell you, you should know. And voluntarily you say, basically, thank you for telling me that, and here is my joy and peace. Somebody dents your car, thank you for denting my car, here is my joy and peace. So we voluntarily give it up. So you have to ask yourself why. And this is the freedom that spirituality gives us, is to not give it up, to not need it from outside, and not to give it up. To recognize that that actually is our most precious, sacred thing. And to hold on to that. And it's all within us. Otherwise, these saints and sages living in caves in the jungle would not be so happy. Right? If you really needed things to be happy. So even though we may not choose to necessarily live like that, it's an important lesson of where joy comes from, where peace comes from. Wonderful.